name is Sam. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. And Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency. We offer a ton of great free resources like company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help you succeed throughout your career. Before we get started, we will be taking questions at the end of today's webinar. You'll find that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to leave questions as yourself or anonymously, so don't be afraid to ask whatever comes to mind. And as a reminder, we will be taking them at the end of the presentation. We're also recording today's webinar, and we will be sending it out in a follow-up email. So if you miss anything or you want to rewatch it back, you will have the chance to do so. We'll also be posting it to the Fairygodboss site on that same page where you registered for the event, so you can always revisit that page to find this recording. Here with me today is Lynn Juve, founder of Bespoke Professional. Prior to starting Bespoke Professional, Lynn pivoted from education to tech and realizes that the process was not built for pivoters, and the tools available for job searching were actually making it harder for pivoters. After pivoting and achieving her goals of building and managing a team at a respected tech company and earning six figures, she felt more unhappy and anxious than she ever had in her entire life. She found herself looking for a new role and instead created a company where she loves the work she does every day and seeing her clients succeed. Thanks so much for being here today, Lynn. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to see where all you guys are at. I noticed there's some people from Wisconsin. That's where I'm from originally. Seattle, that's where I am most of the time. I hope it's not too cloudy for you. And as Samantha said, I do everything job search. I'll get into my story a little bit as well, but really started this because felt that there was a big need. And this is my third, I think, webinar with Fairygodboss. This is my favorite place to be, my favorite audience. So I'm super grateful for you guys. Packed a ton of content into today's presentation. So really excited. And there will be time at the end for questions as well. And Samantha's great at fielding those. All right, let's make sure that I can there we go. Okay, so here's what we're going to go over today. How to crowdsource information. That's really about going out and finding out more about what types of jobs are available to you through people. And then, of course, this is the crux of, I think, our challenge, and what we're getting at today is people really will often ask you what you want to do, and that can be a really hard question if you don't know. So we're going to talk about how to get this ball rolling, even if you don't know the answer to that. And of course, the dreaded job descriptions. I hear how much job descriptions can work against people. So we'll talk about how to navigate those. And of course, I try to pack as much value in this presentation as I can, but there's only so much we can do in 1 hour. And so I really hope to continue this with you guys. And during this conversation, if there are things that I can't fully go into, I will hint at some other resources for you that are all completely free. And then in a follow-up email, I'll send you guys here's where you can go to get that if that's something you're interested in as well. So let's get going. All right. So my own pivot almost didn't happen. I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. What happened is I was living here in Medellin, Colombia. I had been a teacher for 8 years. I had done some teaching at public schools in the States and California. I had also taught at a private high school here. And I had started a business and I loved it. So I was like, okay, I think what I really want to do is get into corporate. And I think tech seems like the place where everything's happening. A lot of companies are tech-based, even if that's not how they're known, things like that. So I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, but I don't really know. And I had this idea that some of the skills that I had used as a teacher were really coming in handy in my business. I was training people, like employees. I was using a lot of communication. I had an English degree. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go and try to figure out what I want to do. So I did what most people do, I think, or a lot of people do. I went to LinkedIn and I was like, I'm just looking at different jobs that are out there, right? And what happened was every single job that I would pull up, LinkedIn would read this algorithm and say, you're in the top 10% or whatever for this job. It told me that I was in the bottom for every single job. It basically told me I wasn't qualified for anything. And so luckily, I don't know if it was pure audacity or I'd already committed to moving to Seattle because of my partner. So I was like, okay, well, I have to do something else. So I kept talking to people. And it was really through people that I learned about the opportunity that I landed in, which was a contract role for Microsoft. So it was someone that I hadn't talked to in 10 years. I just reached out to her. We went to undergrad together, and she was like, okay, tell me a little bit more about what you've been doing. I actually think you'd be great for this content writing role on my team at Microsoft. And I would have had no way of knowing that was possible. She wasn't someone who came at me and said, give me your elevator pitch, right? And so I was fortunate to land that job. And there was actually one more piece that I must have been the way that I wrote it for Samantha. So it was really cool because it was through that job that I figured out next what I wanted to do. It was through taking something, and I really enjoyed it. But that job allowed me to do some things and realize that I wanted to get into training, which put me into my sort of job that felt like exactly where I was supposed to be when I became a product trainer, and then a program manager of training and learning and development, and then eventually a people manager building a team, as Samantha mentioned. And when I got to this point in that career where I loved what I was doing, but there were just things that were off. I'll send you to my Instagram if you guys want to hear that story, if you're, in a difficult environment and you're not feeling it right now. But I was able to actually leverage what I'd learned previously and get another contract job for Microsoft for a lot more than I initially did, and get this fully remote job that allowed me to figure out my next step, which was starting the business. So that is all to say, the second time I got the job was through another contact that I'd first met at Microsoft. So it was often people that gave me the idea of what to do next. And I have clients that come out and know exactly what they want to do. But if you're here, you're probably here because maybe you don't know that exact job title. And the idea here is that's totally fine. And I'm not alone. A lot of my clients, I'd say 50% or more, don't necessarily know what they want to do when we start this process. Okay, so as you can see from my story, I really like to come at this from a spot of like, this is a really hard thing for everyone. And part of it is putting yourself out there. So I hear, and this is a word, and I'd be super interested if you identify this word. How many people in here identify with the idea of imposter syndrome? So put a yes. You can put a 1 if that's easier, like 1. If you identify with imposter syndrome, put that in the chat. Awesome. And some people don't like that word or relate to that word. I'm seeing like 100%, definitely, lots of exclamation marks. Okay, I always love this group because I don't even have to put the numbers. You guys are always here to say, and everyone look at how many other people are feeling this. There is this idea that we are not worthy of getting help from people unless we show up perfectly. So I want you to think about it like this. When you are feeling imposter syndrome, when people come to you and say things that are negative, like, you know what, the reason you haven't found a job is because of this, or you're feeling like, oh, my LinkedIn profile sucks, or whatever it is, you're going to get positive messages too, but your imposter syndrome or that negative in your brain is going to say, oh my gosh, look at all this evidence I have that I'm not doing it right and that I'm not ready. And it's like the negativity is going to adhere to that, right? Also our fear, it's like, if I say like, oh, I'm not ready and I just need to work on my LinkedIn profile a little bit longer, I can stay in the safe place, right? I can stay alone. I can be on my couch with my laptop and I can just work on my LinkedIn profile and work on it. And I don't have to put myself out there. And that is so understandable, but you probably won't find your job alone. You probably won't. I don't have a single client that I can think of. There's probably, I would say 5% maybe. I'm thinking of a pool of about 155 people maybe. I think fewer than 5% got their job by applying online. Most of them got it through someone else. And so, if you like reading Brene Brown, throw in the chat if you're a Brene Brown reader. She says that our brain makes up stories. So I've had clients come to me with elaborate stories on how they didn't get great, awesome, huge fan. I don't know how we lived a life before Brene Brown. When I was reading her books and I was like, the first book I was reading, I was doing it on audio and I was walking down the street and I was like, this is what my clients need. And then I got farther into the book. I bought the book, I read it, and I was like, I need to sit down and read this instead of just listening to it while I walk around town pre-COVID. And I was like, I need this, right? Because we all struggle with this. My clients, me, and of course I relate a lot to my clients. The book, the first one that I read, and I'm actually going to send everything I referenced today, I'm going to send you guys in an email. I think the best one to start with is the gifts of imperfection. I thought it was just me, but it wasn't, is also really, really good. Um, so the idea is like we make up stories. And so I had these clients come to me with elaborate stories of why, you know, a job posting went up and their friend didn't tell them about it. And they're like, it's because my friend doesn't think I'm qualified. And it turns out a lot of times I'll be like, why don't you go ask them? Or why don't we look at these other things? Like, do we have evidence of this? Our brain makes up stories and it feels like they must be right because they feel logical. But the thing is that we're going to adhere to the negative. It's easier to adhere to the negative, right? It's easier to believe that we need to keep working on it because it's scary to be like, oh, I'm ready to network now. That's scary, And we're like, okay. And we'll talk about what are the things that are going to happen when you do it and why you can hit some walls. But think about the old school way of what's happened. It was like, I'm going to go get a job and someone's going to give me this job and I'm going to be very lucky and I'm going to have it for 30 years and I'm going to get the gold watch, right? That is not the way that things work right now, right? We need to go out there and advocate for ourselves. And we'll get into kind of the people that you're looking for, but you're never going to be perfect. And no matter how good your LinkedIn profile is, no matter how good your resume is, you know what they say about opinions, right? Everybody has one. They're going to be able to find something to pick at with your LinkedIn profile. They're going to be able to find something to pick at with your resume. They're going to tell you your pitch isn't good enough. And there will be people out there who will do that no matter what you do. So we can't be perfect. What we have to do is figure out how to just get out there and do it. And that's what we're going to talk about. Okay. So what that leads us to is crowdsourcing information. Here's a book probably a lot of you haven't heard as much about. And put it in the chat if you have. Playing Big by Tara Moore. Tara Moore explains that if you're going to go out and you're going to create something, if you're coming from the tech side, it could be like, okay, if we're creating an app. But if you're going to create a presentation, like I created a presentation for you guys today, I can't just create it in a vacuum, right? I can't sit around and create something perfect and then go ahead and put it to the audience. Same thing if I create that app, right? I have to do testing before it's ready. I have to figure out, okay, what do people think about this? What is my audience like, right? And in this case, I have clients who I'm talking to about these things on a one-to-one basis and small groups. And I'm seeing like, what do they think when I give them presentations? What topics are important to them, right? If you are trying to figure out what job title you want by yourself, that's really hard to do, right? Because first of all, job titles are changing so quickly. We all know that a lot of job titles that came out in the last few years, everything from, community manager, thinking about like how new customer success is and some of the type of support roles that are out there. I know there's like a lot of new roles out there that aren't as techy as well. But you don't even sometimes know that those job titles exist, but they could very well correspond to your experience. And with these new kind of fields popping up, and I love to use the example of customer success because I worked really closely with a huge customer success team. And the majority of those people came from other fields because if you have a new field, then obviously you're not going to have people with a lot of experience, right? It's not like I can go out and find people who had 10 years experience in customer success. They're very few and far between. So it's really hard for you to figure out what you want to do by yourself. So what I'm going to encourage every person to do is you're going to go out and you're going to talk to people. And crowdsourcing is where you go out and you get, this can be done technologically, but it can also be done just by you going out and saying, okay, I'm going to go and interview people about their jobs and what they do. And if you think about it, that is how I found two of my jobs and technically made two pivots, first to tech and then also to more of a consulting type of role where I was talking to people and realized, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. One of them, she suggested it to me. And another one, I was at a Christmas party and I was talking to this woman I worked really closely with at my first Microsoft gig. And she was talking about how consulting was so much fun because she got to build things. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I've been doing. I kept building new programs. Now, how could I go and do that, and keep doing that? So it's really hard to figure out what it is you want to do by yourself. Tara Moore talks about this idea that if you're creating a LinkedIn profile, if you're pitching yourself to hiring managers and to people who can hire you, you have to go out and sort of test that out with the world. So you're going to go out and start talking to people. And we do this and we get stuck, right? We get stuck because we're not really sure how to start. And that's really hard. I had an interview with kind of an acquaintance that he'd made a lot of really cool videos. He talked a lot about imposter syndrome. He made a video all about imposter syndrome. His name is Jacob. And we did an interview recently for my Instagram because he later made a video where he talked about doing all this networking. And I was like, okay, you talked about imposter syndrome. Now you're talking about networking. How did you get over it? And he basically said, I had to move with my wife to a new city. And if I didn't, my business was going to die. But he also said a really good analogy. He said, if you're looking for a new role, it's as if you're going to sail to the Hawaiian Islands. This works better for us who live on the West Coast, right? Be a little bit harder from where I'm at right now in Colombia. But if you're going to sail somewhere like the Hawaiian Islands, and you may not realize, like, as you get closer to the island, you may say like, oh, I need to navigate. Actually, I want to go to this other island. But you cannot figure that out until you put your boat in the water. And that was genius. It was the metaphor I'd been looking for the way we have to do this is put our boat in the water. We can't start navigating. We can't really do anything until the boat is in the water. So, and I'm going to reference my notes because I've had a lot of customer success, client success stories recently. And so I've tweaked some of these things to match what I'm finding as I'm sort of doubling the results with them. So it is like riding a bike. And I was very uncomfortable here. There's another metaphor for you with that as a former educator. I was a high school teacher. I have a master's in education. My entire family's educators, both my parents. And I love this idea that you can study and be better at things and, perfect it before you go out into the world. That's really where I came from and why, I went through some of this stuff myself of like, what do you mean I'm not qualified? What LinkedIn says I'm not qualified? Like, can I keep doing this? Is this all right? Looking for permission from someone else. But there are certain things in life that are just like riding a bike. You have to get on the bike. You have to put the boat in the water. Otherwise, you're never going to get better at them. And the bad networking meetings are absolutely inevitable. And I was going to talk about this here, but I'm going to talk to you guys about some logistics because I want to kind of address some of the fears that you might have as you're going out to do this, because here's the big one, right? This is what we've been leading up to. You're going to go to a networking meeting and you're going to say, looking for permission for someone else. There's another Brene Brown thing too, right? I can't lie. She says, write yourself a permission slip. And that's really what today's going to be about. I'm going to ask you guys to write yourself a permission slip to go out there and do things imperfectly. So you're like, okay, this is all great, right? This is great. I'm going to go out and I'm going to interview people. I'm going to ask them what they want to do. But inevitably, in every networking meeting, probably someone's going to say, what do you want to do? And it goes back to this idea. We think like, oh my gosh, I have to tell them an answer and it has to be good. Again, because it's sort of the like, I don't know. I don't want to blame it on like a previous generation. I don't want to blame it on like any specific people, but like there are people who will tell you like you have to show up perfectly and you have to know the answer. And those people are telling you that because either they are insecure themselves and they're uncomfortable with this idea that you're putting yourself out there in order to learn, or that worked for them and they want you to follow the same path and they're just trying to help you, right? People don't mistake the idea that like when you're insecure or you're feeling nervous, that another person isn't putting their own insecurities on you as well, right? It's not like we think like, oh, that person's so strong. We can't hear what's happening inside that person's head. We don't understand what insecurities have shaped their own journey as well, right? So you're going to go out and you're going to, let's say you're like, okay, this is perfect. One of my past coworkers is at a job. And this sounds like very ideal, right? That I'm interested in, or I see, someone I went to college with, or, my mother-in-law offered to introduce me to her friend, whatever, who is doing something that looks really interesting to me. And so I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, but inevitably they're going to say, what do you want to do? Here's the thing. It is okay to say, I don't know yet. It is totally fine, because what makes people nervous is when you're like, oh, maybe this or maybe that. And you seem nervous and you're rambling about it. And so, yes, I'm not saying like there's this, if 10 is perfect and 0 is like, I just got out of bed and I haven't thought about anything today and I've never prepared anything with this. Like the idea is to, do a 5. I want you to show up prepared for a networking meeting, not because you owe it to anyone else, but so that you feel good. And the way to do this is planning and semantics, right? You want to sound comfortable with the idea that you don't know. You want to say, this is just the stage I'm at right now. I don't know what I want to do. And I need people to help figure it out. So I don't know what I want to do yet. This is why I'm conducting these meetings. I'm really interested in what you do. Or I know that you know a lot of people that are in whatever. I'm interested in just expanding my network personally and professionally. And I really appreciate you sitting down with me. I will tell you when I have decided. And you could really help me out by telling me about your story, telling me how you landed your job, right? So the idea is like you're shifting the objective of the meeting. People think they go into a networking meeting with you thinking they know what you need and wanting to give it to you. And if they think, okay, I'm going into this meeting to help her find a job, that's a huge ask. That's a big bar, right? That some people might be like, yes, I of course want to help. And other people might be like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know people in your industry. I don't, whatever, right? When you say, you know what, all I need is this. Here's what I'm looking for. What you're looking for is you to tell me about what you've done. And then you're shifting that, right? And you're saying, I'm confident in saying, I don't know what I want to do yet. And I'm cheating. I'm watching the chat. I don't let Samantha do this, right? Is it okay to say, I know what I don't want to do? Yes. Yes. I think I'll let Samantha field that one. We can get into that answer later, but sometimes that's in the form of, I know what I don't want. And that's okay too. You at the same time that I say, I want you to show up and not worry so much about being perfect, I think we want to be positive for the most part, right? Um, I'm Faye, I hope that we can get to that question at the end. Okay, so here's another sort of answer. What you can do is, if you don't know what you want to do, but you know you're interested in that person's career, instead of saying, I don't know, you can say, well, I'm really interested in pursuing a career in journalism, in customer success, in learning and development, in marketing, email marketing. Like you can say like, well, I'm really interested in what you do and trying to figure out if that might be something that I'm interested in. Now let's talk about what you do, right? So even it's not like, if you're interested, if the reason you scheduled that meeting with that particular person is because you're interested in the type of company they work at or the type of career they have, just say that. Just say that, because it's not like you're not committing to life to have that exact career. But if you are genuinely interested in what they do, shift the conversation that way. That's also a very easy ask to say, I am interested in what you do. I want to learn more about it to see if it's right for me. You can say title is not the most important thing to me. Another way to go about this is say, this is kind of what I would have to go back and look at the conversation that I had with this woman from college. Most of it happened over Facebook Messenger, actually. But I know that, she started asking me things like, oh, you've been teaching. Oh, you speak Spanish. Oh, you live abroad. She had similar things. So she was like, okay, which of those do you like those things? Would you be interested in a writing type of job? Would you be interested in working in a tech job? So she was helping me figure those things out. You don't necessarily have to know a title either. So maybe you do know. I knew I wanted to work in tech, and that might sound funny. But I think like it's unapologetic. I want what I want, and it's my life. And I think I had this inkling of like, okay, these are the skills that I like. I like writing. I like communication. I love teaching. How can I use those skills in my next job? You can talk about that. You can say, my passion is building new programs. I don't really care if it's a program manager title or a project manager title, or if it's whatever kind of title it is, but these are the skills that I'm interested in using in my next job. The reason I say be unapologetic is, in that moment, we feel like we're answering to that person. And yes, if you want their help to some degree, you are. But at the end of the day, sometimes like you are there for you, right? You're not really there for them, and they're there for you. They're choosing to be there to help you or not, right? So this is probably a good time to get into this. This comes up all the time. There are going to be people that are going to that don't want to help you. There are going to people, there are bad networking meetings. And over again, I get questions like, I had a bad networking meeting. And it's always, I did this, I didn't pitch myself right. I started to get nervous, so I rambled, whatever. And then I break it down with my clients, and I'm like, that person didn't want to help you. I know this sounds harsh because there's probably a lot of people who do want to help you. But sometimes, for example, people took a very specific path to a role and they're uncomfortable with the idea that you could get that role in a different path. So if you look at my example of the first person who helped me, she pivoted from, she had an English degree, she had gone and taught abroad. I don't think she had a teaching degree, but we had a very similar background in that way. And so she thought, I pivoted into this type of role. There are many pivoters here. She could probably do it too. I have met a lot of my clients have had situations where a person who, like, for example, if that person had a very specific education, then the person was like, you can't pivot into this. Like, so there are going to be people, and people are insecure. People, why do they take the meeting? I don't know. I don't know why they take the meeting. And this is a topic that actually came up in my interview with Jacob. I'm going to send out the link for that in case people want to watch it. He talks about having negative networking meetings. And I said, oh, it sounds like you really realize that person, like they didn't pay attention to why you wanted to meet with them. And he's like, yeah, I know it now, but I didn't know it during the meeting. But he has this advantage of someone who creates a lot of content. He's a video producer. So he's like, he was able to look back and be like, that person clearly didn't look at any background about me whatsoever, potentially wanted to hire me for a project, but like didn't understand my work or didn't look at my portfolio. So he was able to see that later on. In the moment, we won't always see it. I had someone who told me I would not be able to be successful in this business if I didn't become a recruiter first. And I'm like, and I remember having another networking meeting where someone went so far out of their way to seem like help me. And then the whole thing was like, your business model's all wrong. You should do it this way. And like, I was new and I was like, okay, maybe some of the things I want to do aren't right, but also I want to base this on what matters to me. I just don't want to do it whatever way. Right. And it turns out that by kind of like talking to more people, it wasn't true. And the recruiter thing, when I look back, I was like, well, I was a hiring manager and I built a team. I worked very closely with my recruiter for a year. I would sit with him. We would do things together. I was like, I think I understand what that job is like. And I think I did a lot of, what we do together. Right. So other people will tell us we can't do it. And here's the trick. We want to believe, it's easier to believe that like, oh, if I perfect my pitch and if I just prepare perfectly, then I'll never have another bad networking meeting again. Because we don't want to think like, oh, I'm going to get into a meeting and it's going to be like a cheese grater to the soul. And you're going to have meetings like that. And there's no way to truly know until you get into them. And so it's one of those things, we're going to bump up against people who have insecurities, who put them on us, whatever their reasoning is for not being nice. But I will say this, no one has a good reason for being condescending to you when you come in and say, I'm exploring new opportunities. I'd like to learn from you. I don't know what good reason they possibly have for being condescending. We're all humans. I think almost everybody I know has gotten their job through some of the help of other people. And you just got to keep doing your thing. And if you only focus on the people who want to help you, if that's all you do, you can find a job. Because I'll tell you, when I was pivoting the first time, I had no idea what I was doing. None. I didn't use half the strategies that my clients use. And for that reason, I didn't get a job with as high as pay as I would have liked because I only had one option. Now my clients, like I think of someone who had a very similar background to me, just landed a job not too long ago for almost double the salary that I got a job for. And the biggest difference was the strategies that we use to prepare her and to go and get the right opportunity, not just any opportunity, right? So you're going to run into people that don't want to help you. It is not you. It is not you. And you know what? Maybe you will make a mistake, but I'll tell you what, here's how I know this. Not only were there people that were willing to help me, I pivoted, and inevitably many of my coworkers would come to me, and often it was like their significant other. They're like, they're a teacher and they really want to leave teaching, but they don't really know what they want to do. Would you have coffee with them? And you know what? If they were willing to come to me, I would always say yes. And you know what? None of those people knew what they wanted to do next. That's why they were talking to me. And I never was like, oh my God, I can't help you if you don't know what you want to do. I was like, oh, okay, well, which parts of teaching do you like the best? Do you like creating the materials the best? Do you like being in front of the audience the best? Would you enjoy teaching adults? Like, that's why we were here, right? That's why we were there together. So people would either decide like, hey, it would make me feel good to help you, or it would make me feel good to be condescending to you. It sucks. But you know what? If you just keep going, you'll find the people that want to help you. And the people that want to help are more, I think, than the people who are trying to feed some sort of ego problem of their own. Here's the other component of this, right? People like talking about their stories. And if we go back to this idea of, I don't know what I want to do, that's why I'm here. I want to hear about you, and I want to learn from you and your experiences. And maybe you want to hear about several of the different jobs they've had. Or you're saying, I'm interested in the career you have. Can you tell me what it's like? A lot of people are very comfortable with that because that's an easy ask. Talking about what I do all the time, talking about my life story. Not everyone loves to talk about themselves. Chances are, if you ask for the meeting that way, they're going to, be willing to do it if they're accepting the meeting. But additionally, that's something that if you say like, oh, tell me about your job, that's something I eat, sleep, and breathe every day. So that's something that's easy for me to do. You're not asking for me like, can you give me a referral? No, you're saying, can you tell me about your story? And so most people, that's pretty easy for them to step in and do that. All right, let's talk about job descriptions. The first thing that I want to say is I think I said this earlier, very few of my clients have actually gotten their job by applying online. So let's just get this out of the way right now. If you are applying online and you are not getting responses, it does not mean that you're overqualified or underqualified, or that people think you've been on a break too long, or that you're trying to make a pivot that's not possible. It just means that the system doesn't work the way that you think it works. I used to like to say that the system is broken, but I read something on Instagram that said systems work for the people that they're meant to work for. So pivoters, sometimes we're not the people that the system is designed for. So if that is to say, you can circumvent these systems by networking. Now, and I'm actually going to I have a follow-up resource for you guys that lays out 5 secrets to networking. This is like throughout the old school stuff. Pretty sure that your mentor in grad school or your, parent, or, in my case, it was my aunt, did not give you this information about networking. Like it kind of goes against the intuitive. So there's a follow-up guide that I want to give all of you guys as well. But job descriptions are from the 1970s. I saw this happening where I was like and I heard many experts. I heard a whole hiring team from a company that put on what was it, like a workshop. It was a whole workshop about resumes, and they talked the whole time about how like just circumvent the resume system. And I was like, okay, this seems like the wrong topic for this type of workshop. But what was really interesting for me is I had an opportunity to meet a woman who's a researcher. And then a few months later, we were at the same conference speaking, and I was all excited. I was like, and she's like, could you take pictures of me? And I said, sure. And she starts talking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she laid out all the data and all the evidence for everything that I had seen. And what she said is that job descriptions have almost not changed at all since the 1970s. So the fact that you read them and find them confusing and intimidating is not surprising. And I recently talked to someone who said, oh, it's like when I write the job description and then my manager goes in and adds all this stuff to it. And I had this moment too, where I remembered that happened to me, a boss that I loved, but he added a bunch of stuff to it. And I was like, oh no. And he's like, well, that's okay. They're just preferred qualifications. And I was like, you don't understand. People aren't going to apply now. Like people who were going to apply before won't apply now. And this is the best story ever. So I was working with someone over the summer who used to be a teacher. And she was going through job descriptions and she was like, I kept going through, we were in a group program together, but for some reason having a one-on-one conversation. And she's like, every job description I'd pull up, I could not even get through it because I would get so much anxiety reading it. She's like, I don't know. She's like, I know you, and there's all these other people that you've worked with and that are in this program that have pivoted away from teaching. Like, I know it's possible in theory, but every time I read a job description, I get super intimidated. And she's like, I had this idea. She said, I realized that the teaching job I just held last school year is open and that the job description is online. So I went to find it. And when I opened it up, I realized that job description was so far above what I had done. And this woman, I actually taught with her. She's amazing. She's an amazing teacher. She wins every award. She's very well liked by her students and staff, just always a leader. And so it's interesting to hear her say this as someone who's worked with her. And she was like, I would feel intimidated to apply for this job that I held for years. There it is. Job descriptions suck. So I think that sometimes it's hard to get away from looking at them at all. If you guys can network around them, fantastic. And I think the follow-up tool I'm going to give you will help you with that. And I talk about it a lot on my Instagram channel, and I'm going to tell you all the places where you can continue to learn more about networking if you want to try to circumvent this altogether. But often job descriptions are a really good way for you to go out and figure out what is out there, what's available, what companies you might want to work for, and that sort of thing. So let's go through how to read them. And I'm going to do this fairly briefly because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions as well. We have about 20 minutes left. So I want you to focus on the area that says, here's what you would do. Here's what you would do. Because first of all, the thing that trips up most people is the years of experience. And again, I had the opportunity to talk to my sister about this. My sister has also made 2 pivots, not a total coincidence. I had made my first big pivot, and then she was learning search engine optimization at her job in, I think, marketing, and kind of got pulled into this marketing department. But then she wanted to go out and get another search engine optimization role. And she was like, they all ask for 5 years of experience. And the problem with that is 2 things. A, very specifically with search engine optimization, this is like how you appear in Google search results, right? Like she would help her current company make sure that they'd show up on the first page when someone typed in what they were looking for, right? At the time, because I want to say this was like 6 years ago-ish, search engine optimization had changed so much the 5 years prior to that and has continued to change. So someone who has 5 years of experience, it's like, okay, those first few years are probably in things that are antiquated at this point. Second of all, we all know people, and this is not to be harsh or judgmental, but everybody is different. So some people after 2 years on the job can do just what well as someone else who had 5 years. And probably most people, like, what did you learn in year 3 that you didn't learn in 1 and 2? I know I'm throwing a lot of books at you, but I will make sure to list these. I can't ever find the stat. Again, I've read it, and I read this book called Rookie Smarts. A lot of people haven't read this book. It's fantastic. She quotes data that says most things you do in your job take 20 to 40 hours to learn. 20 to 40 hours. So this years of experience thing is the thing that will throw you. You should pretty much ignore it. You want to go to the daily activities and say, could I do that? It's not, have I done that exact thing? It's not, have I done that alone? You're not going to be working alone in this job either. You are going to have coworkers. You are going to have resources, right? You are hopefully going to have training. And could you do most of that? Right? And we hear this like, if I meet 50% of the qualifications, I don't even really care about the qualifications. What I want to know is, if you look at the daily activities, do you feel like you could do the job? Do you feel like you can do it? Because if you feel like you can do it, you probably can. And I know this because with a lot of my clients, I have them go window shopping for jobs and bring back titles. And I've only had 1 client that I came back and said, look, I think we should go back and do this differently because I think that this is asking for a very hard skill. But I've had several clients, including one very recently, where they actually bring us job titles that they're overqualified for. And we're like, let's step up. You should actually be above this, right? Because of that imposter syndrome, because of that intimidation factor, because we think we have to meet all the qualifications. And by the way, this is my soapbox. I cannot give this without saying this. All this information that, women, and if you're a woman, if you're a man, however you identify, whatever gender you identify with, I think everyone can feel this way, but the idea is that there's this kind of thing right now that says like women and femme people are insecure or don't have as much confidence. If up until someone told you that, you know, oh, you can apply to a job because you only meet 50% of the requirements. If you weren't applying to a job when you only met 50% of the requirements, that's not because you were insecure. That's because that seems logical that you'd have to meet most of the requirements, right? So this is a shift in thinking, but I want to tell you, it's not because you're an insecure person necessarily. And if you feel imposter syndrome, that's okay. That's normal. If the whole system is kind of intimidating, right? But at the same time, let's not think like, oh, if you didn't apply because you meet 50% requirements, that means that you're like not a confident person. I don't think that has anything to do with it. All right, so we can talk more about job descriptions. I'm hoping you guys want to talk more about the networking piece, because that is really, that we had to talk about the job descriptions because that can be very intimidating and that can sort of like be a roadblock for you. But the way that things happen is by people going out and talking to other people. And that was the idea for today. So I know I have to figure out what Sam always sends out a follow-up email, or Fairygodboss sends out one. I want to send you guys one out personally too, because I have a couple resources I want to put together. And I knew I'd mentioned some books on here that I hadn't written down yet. So I'm going to go back and add those for you guys too. I'm going to send you an email in the next 24 hours. And that's going to be from jobsearch@lynnjuve.com. And I will send you the networking secrets thing I was telling you about. I literally just redid that so that it meets all of the stuff. I've been able to really help clients through COVID. I've had clients 4 job offers in less than 4 weeks recently, and want to give you guys all that stuff that's been working for people. But also I'm running some contests, and there's actually a couple giveaways I'm doing. And so I'm going to send you, it's really easy to enter. It doesn't require a lot, but I'm going to send you in the email how you can do that you can win a completely free one-on-one coaching sessions with me. And then basically the videos I referenced with Kristen and Jacob, my own pivot story is a video on Instagram if you guys want to watch that. I'll send you where to watch those things and direct links in the email, so you can just click, get to what you want. And of course, I'm hoping that you hang out with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, any of those places that you prefer, so that we can continue the conversation. You guys can write me questions and we can keep interacting. This is how I make my content. I am constantly creating new free content, and some content that's not free, but a lot of content that's free based on the questions people send me, the needs people have. So it's actually a favor for me to hear from you guys in the future. And so I really hope we can continue this conversation, and I can have some one-on-one conversations with you guys, whether they're just little voicemails or DMs about what you're going through and how I can continue to help you. Awesome. Sam, are you ready to do Q&A? You have some things queued up, I assume. Yeah?
Yeah, let's jump right in. Thanks
Awesome.
so much for a wonderful presentation. And I know we already have a ton of questions in the Q&A.
Great.
We're going to get to as many as possible, but if you didn't submit it, make sure you submit it right now. But let's start off with this question from Amy here. She said, I'm trying to pivot from nonprofit to tech, but I'm finding that people who work on the team or the type of team that I'm interested in are not open or able to having a conversation about their work or company. How do you get around that obstacle?
Yes, this is such a good question. Who is this from?
Amy.
Every person who writes me a question, I hope we continue this, and you can send me follow-ups on, like, Instagram has voice messages and things like that, because this is everything, right? What she's asking, I know a ton of people, like, throw it in the chat. I bet a bunch of people are thinking the same thing. We tend to, in job search networking, and this is very logical and very wise in a way, very smart. We say, okay, the job I'm looking for is here. So if I'm going to network, I'm going to try to talk to this person, right? And that's great. If that person will talk to you, cool. But often if that person doesn't know us very well, or for whatever reason, like there's a block there, maybe they're that person where they don't identify with your experience. They're like, you really, you're pivoting in here. I have this really formal education, or like, I have this background, whatever it is. The way to get around this, and it sounds laborious, but it works really well, it's very effective, is to start networking with people that you know better, that care about your success. So what happens is you go out and talk to people you've worked with. You talk about the people who are your best advocates, your friends, your family. We don't think about talking to those people because we don't think that they know how to get into the job that we want, but they know people who know people. And so when you sit down and you say to people, I am looking to learn, I'm looking to expand my network personally and professionally, and you talk to the people you know, tell them what you're going through, tell them what you're looking for, and say, do you know someone who is in this industry? And if you don't, do you know someone who might know someone? I would love to just learn from those people. Those are the kind of conversations you want to have with people. And that's the ask, because it sounds like it'll take a long time to get there, but it won't, because along the way, you'll meet lots of people that can help you. And by starting with the people who are most likely to help you and want to help you, they will often go out of their way to find what you need, or to connect you with people who have a lot of connections.
Perfect. We have a few people asking if you could just say your Instagram handle one more time.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm so excited to connect with you guys there. I make so many videos, and you can send me DMs there today if you have follow-up questions. It is, I have it right here actually. It is at Bespoke Professional, just at Bespoke Professional. You will see my face. I think you'll recognize me. Shoot me a hey as soon as you start following, and I will definitely respond to each of you personally, even if it takes me a couple days.
We can also include that in the follow-up email, so you'll have it in your inbox later today.
Awesome.
Another question from Audra here. This is an interesting one that I feel like we get a lot. Is there a tool or website where you can enter your skills or interests that then spits out a corresponding job title or career category ideas? Most job sites have you search for a title versus the skills. So how do you know what to search for? Essentially that idea of like working backwards to match your skills to a title. Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I think I'm overdue to make a video about this. And I do have one exercise that I do with people. So there's a couple things about this, and this is going to sound like bad news, but by addressing this, it's really going to help, because what I worry about most, no matter how much today I've talked about imposter syndrome, no matter how much I've talked about, the first webinar that Samantha and I did together was called You're More Qualified Than You Think. And I think it broke a record for registrations, because people are like, no matter how many times we talk about imposter syndrome, it's still going to hit you. Like, it still hits me every day, right? There are moments where I'm like, wait, this person wants to hire me. Like, they're too successful, right? Things like that. We all go through that. New situations pop up. So, the thing I'm worried about with you of using a tool and using something external is that, it may tell you something that doesn't feel right to you, or it may send you down this track. So one phenomena I am seeing in the last, I would say, year of my business is people who've actually identified something they want to do. They're like, my mentor in grad school told me I had to pick a specific title. So I've been going for this title, and they're hitting a wall constantly. And they're like, oh, I'm just doing it wrong. I'm just doing it wrong. It's like, well, actually, why that job title? They're like, well, there's a bunch of other job titles that I'd really like as well, but I was told I had to pick something really specific. So the thing about that is you're relying on a computer. And I'll back this up one more time by saying, I recently, this was in the last couple months, went to a job title for a client that was video producer. No joke. I have never worked in anything video in my life. And it told me that I would be in the top 10% of applicants. And there were like 150 applicants. And I was like, and this was LinkedIn. I'm like, this cannot be right. So I'm very worried that a computer, we want to go externally for the answer, right? But I have two types of clients. One type of client goes out and networks, and they start talking to people, and they're like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this. This is a job title I feel very compelled toward, and I am going to go take a new class, a certification. My sister represents this type. She took a class as a Scrum Master, got a job as a Scrum Master, immediately. At that time, I had more clients in the other bucket, so I was surprised by that. But I have clients that go at networking, helps them figure out what they want to do, and then they start networking saying, I want to do this title. But 50% of my clients, and this was me, they get into networking meetings and someone goes, oh my gosh, you know what? And this was me with this woman, Sonia, who's an angel on high. She was like, you've been teaching abroad, you speak Spanish, you have an English degree. I think that you should apply for my team. And I just applied and I got it. And then, of course, with my friend later who worked at Microsoft, we were at a Christmas party. I can picture We were in our mentor's kitchen. She would have this Christmas party every year. And she started talking about consulting. And I was like, I think I want to do that. And I took her out to lunch and she's like, yeah, I think you could do that. And I applied at her company and I got it, right? I applied at other companies and they tried to tell me that I couldn't earn the salary I wanted. So it wasn't like smooth sailing in that second one so much. But we want like this concrete answer. And there's probably a lot of job titles out there that you could do. And I don't want you to narrow too much. I don't want you to be discouraged if a computer tells you you can't, because I've been told no by a computer and it was wrong. And I want the opportunity for people. We don't only network so people can tell us what to do, because in that moment when someone goes, oh my gosh, you said that you've done what, I think you'd be perfect for my team, I should refer you. In those conversations, that's where they often offer to refer you or offer to introduce you to somebody. If you don't have those conversations with them, you can't leverage the referral through the conversation where you started by saying, approaching it with learning and approaching it with this awesome attitude of like humility. So there isn't a tool that I found that I like. I think that with my clients as pivoters and people who are coming back from breaks and people in toxic work environments, most of my clients meet one of those three things or haven't looked for a job for a long time. Those sites usually do more harm than good for them. If you have any follow-ups for me on that, I hope I hear from you on Instagram. Any of you.
Awesome.
It's a hard one.
This is an interesting question from an anonymous attendee here.
Right.
What happens if I'm not proud of my job, but have mostly soft skills that really prove my value to a company? I know some people are risk adverse to those with shorter and more random jobs on the resume.
There are people who are risk averse to anything and everything. There are people who will say, you can't get this job because X, you can't get this job because of Y. I mean, I had a really good example is I had a client who was very self-made. She was at probably a pretty small company, but a very successful company that she had started with someone who was like a very good friend of hers. And so she had this networking meeting with someone who had an Ivy League education, and she wanted to leave. She was like, I want to go out for a while. I did this sort of entrepreneurial thing with my friend. I want to go and get a job for someone else at this point in my career. I think I have a lot to learn. I want to do a different sector, things like that, right? And this other person was like, you think you're going to do what? Like, I have an Ivy League education. I don't know how you think you're going to do this without an MBA, blah, 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 blah. Within 2 months, the woman had a director title at a really cool company. You know, so there will be people who will tell you no all the time. Not being proud of what you have done recently. This is super common because previously I got lots of clients who are in a toxic work environment or just feeling not appreciated by their boss. And then no matter how much your brain sort of knows, oh, this might be a bad environment, or, oh, this might just not be a good fit, they don't get me. It's really hard day in and day out to be not valued and then not internalize that. We're human, right? But now I'm also seeing this a lot because people have been laid off and are embarrassed about that, right? Because of COVID, it's embarrassing, or you think like, oh, why was I the first person laid off and no one told me why? A lot of times it's not necessarily logical. I've seen great colleagues get laid off, like won an award and 2 months later they're getting laid off and you're like, why them? So I think it's that idea of, if I'm you, I'm going to go out first and network with the people who I know care about me. It sounds redundant, but if I'm telling you this to you, anonymous, who asked the question, it's allow yourself a way to do this that's dipping your toe in the water, right? Like, I use all these things like put the boat in the water, like maybe just put the boat in the water and let it sit at the dock for a while, right? Talk to people who you care about and tell them like, I need help. I am in the wrong mindset for this. Often people will look to someone like me for this, but because sometimes your friends and family get anxious about your stuff. And you can keep listening to my videos and, you know, we can engage that way or whatever, but look for a way that you can talk to people that care about you, that are going to be gentle with you, and talk to them and gain your confidence that way. And then sort of like start taking notes on the people who are like, oh, I could do this. Oh yes, these people reinforce this, right? And I would say talk to someone, whether it's like, it could be a coach, it could be a therapist, it could be your best friend, it could be a mentor, but someone who's in your corner to kind of keep you sane about this idea of, at some point, someone's going to tell you no, and you are going to get some negative reinforcements to make sure that you're not only grabbing onto the negative. So get out there, but give yourself some grace in taking baby steps and doing it in an environment that feels safe first.
Cool. Question from Hillary here. She wants to know, In interviews or screenings, how do you effectively communicate that although you don't necessarily have the experience doing a component of the job, but you can learn really fast, adapt quickly, and you know you'll be able to do it? So do you have like creative ways of showing that and
Absolutely.
not just saying it?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is such a good question because as a hiring manager, I heard over and over again, and I hired a lot of people. Like, again, product training is not necessarily where you hire people who've only been product trainers. We hired a lot of teachers. Gosh, I hired people who are presenters. I hired someone who worked at a museum. That was like one of the best presentations we saw in the interview. So, I know that these people are qualified, but a lot of people did not have a good answer for that question. Um, it depends where you're at too, because if you're in a phone interview, there's a chance that like they're still trying to gauge your abilities. If you're in an in-person interview, the thing I want you to remember is you beat out a lot of people to be there. A lot of people to be there. So remember that, right? Because there's something about you that they like. And keep in mind that when you think about interviewing or networking or any situation, you're never, if you focus all of your energy on saying like, oh my gosh, I have to prepare for things I'm not good at, make sure you spend more time preparing for the things you are good at and you do have. Because from what I've seen, my clients typically get a job where they meet 60% of the qualifications on paper. 60. Like, that's not very much. But when you're in an interview, you're up against people who have a different 60% qualifications. So they're going to hire you like they know that you can do XYZ really well and other person can do the other thing really well, and that neither of you have the other thing. But the idea is who best explained how they're going to approach it, right? So that's what I really want you to keep in mind about your interview approach and your networking approach in general. Like this idea that we have to prepare for the things we're not good at, like really lean into like, let me tell you what I am good at. Let me tell you what I have done. If it's something very specific, and let's talk about like, again, I hope to hear more from this person, but what my mentor taught me at Microsoft, I was like, this is the weirdest thing. They keep asking me like, do you have experience using Salesforce? And I was like, I work at Microsoft. All I do is learn about new technologies every day. I think I know how to like, what they were basically asking is, can I type in names to Salesforce and like pull up results? And then at one point I even had to like later in my future life had to make a report. And what did I do? I went to YouTube, saw how to make the report, and then I did it and it took me 10 minutes. So I was like, I told my mentor, I'm like, I work in tech. Why is this even a question? Like, why is that you'll hire me if I have Salesforce experience, but not like, isn't this something that can be trained on very easily? And she said, when you tell people you learn quickly, everyone says that. So it no longer means anything. So what you want to do is you want to give them an example of a time that you learned something. So this works really well with like a specific tool example, because for me at that point in my career, I would talk about the fact that I'd say, well, as a teacher, I had to develop a fully digital classroom with this platform, and I had no training on it. We just decided as a department to do it. And within this amount of time, I was able to do this. So think about if you say, like, I've never used this tool, but this was a time when I had to learn something, and give them an example and have that example ready and give it to them as if, that's an answer to their question. Well, I haven't used this tool in my last job. I had to learn several tools. One example was, and here's how I did it. Here's the capacity I got up to, here, and lay that out for them. And they can now picture themselves like, oh, look at how she went to that and found the video and then taught herself how to do it. We know she'll be able to do that here. And she's not going to be like, dependent on us every second in the beginning. So that's how I would answer that question, but also keep in mind to prepare the things that you have done really well and talk about those.
Perfect. I mean, being able to teach yourself something and being self-sufficient is such a valuable skill that I would assume most of us on this call probably have, because you're sitting here today.
Right.
So it's safe to say that you can definitely prove that you've gone out there and taught yourself something. So that's really great advice. Thank you, Lynn. And that kind of brings us to the end of the time today. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us for the last hour and took this time for yourself. Thank you, Lynn, for a wonderful presentation and for answering all of our questions. As I mentioned, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with the recording as well as Lynn's contact info later today. Lynn will also be contacting you with some resources and all that great stuff that she mentioned earlier. So be on the lookout for that. Lynn, do you have any final words before I end things today?
I can't reinforce enough how much I'm so excited to have one-on-one conversations with you. And it can be Instagram, but it can also be LinkedIn and Facebook. I check all of those. So I really hope to hear from you, hear more questions from you. Anything you asked today that didn't get answered or wanted to ask but were too shy. I really look forward to continuing to talk to you guys, and I will send you guys an email in the next 24 hours as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a great week, and we'll catch you at the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda.